We are performers.
We are artists.
Audiences.
Teachers.
Students.
We're curious.
Joyful.
Brave.
We make change.
We are Live Arts Miami.
Fueled
by learning
and curiosity.
Inspired
by possibility.
A celebration
of the imagination.
Unleashed.
An action-driven,
people-centered platform.
Committed to true inclusion,
equity,
and the creative process.
A people stage.
Uplifted
by the voices it uplifts.
Where art
is synonymous
with freedom.
Your local source
for global
live arts culture
at the crossroads
of Miami
and the world. For 30 years
and counting.
Live Arts Miami.
Your stage.
Your stage.
Your stage.
Your stage for creating change.
Welcome. Welcome, everyone. And thank you, Live Arts Miami, for that wonderful introduction and the land acknowledgement. I'm Tiffany Madera. I'm the director of Hanan Arts, again, on Tequesta, Calusa, Seminole, Miccosukee land. And I am so excited to welcome you all to 2021 Shimmy Shift Pivot in partnership with Live Arts Miami. And we're gonna jump right in. Shimmy Shift Pivot is the signature education program as part of the Global South Initiative and Institute for Dance and Film of Hanan Arts. And we have two very exciting speakers, panelists, artists, colleagues that I am going to give an abridged bio, and then we're gonna jump into questions. We have a very juicy topic, a necessary, important topic, and those inside the Zoom can ask questions in the Q&A, and hopefully we will get to them in this hour. So I'm going to start with Helene Eriksen. And Helene Eriksen creates multi-month immersive courses into cultures that are not her own. Helene is a dance ethnologist, teacher, performer, and choreographer of traditional dances of the Balkans and Islamic Orient, as well as Argentine tango and folk dances. She lectures and publishes on dance ethnology and costume studies. She has conducted many research projects in Bulgaria, ex-Yugoslavia, Hungary, Romania, Greece, Turkey, Armenia, Georgia, Egypt, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and Argentina, as well as with immigrant communities in Europe and the Americas. And I was able to study with her the beginning of my dance career. And it's an incredible honor to have her here. And I'm also very honored and excited to welcome Roxxanne Shelaby, a dancer and a filmmaker. And Roxxanne Shelaby performs throughout Southern California, bringing her unique dance style, combining her Lebanese and Brazilian heritage and affinity for Egyptian-style Oriental dance. And Roxxanne began performing Middle Eastern dance at the age of 5 and professionally at the age of 16 at the request of Farida Fahmy to represent the world-renowned Reda troupe. And Roxxanne is the producer and director of the award-winning international, the Fez documentary, which traces the birthplace of belly dance on the West Coast. So we have a lot to jump into with these fantastic artists and educators. And so we're going to jump right into the topic at hand. So the focus of this conversation is moving borders, real or imaginary, geopolitical borders, cultural and aesthetic borders, cultural appropriation and cultural violence. So both of you do incredible cultural work within your own cultural group and ethnicity, and with other cultures and working with cultures that are not your own. So can we start by each of you telling us how you identify and how does the broader culture inform your identities and vice versa? So Helene, let's start with you.
It's such a complicated question. I think mostly I identify as a world citizen. So I grew up in Southern California and left the United States at the age of 20 to live in Bulgaria for a year and then in Turkey. And then I became a German resident. And in 2004, well, somewhere I went and lived in Canada for a little bit, moving back and forth to Germany. And then at some point I came and lived partly back in the United States. And about 10 years ago, I started living partly in Argentina. And all of this time also doing research in all of these different places, I speak about 8 or 9 languages, something like that. Some of them quite well, and I don't count the ones that I sort of speak just a little bit because I've studied a lot more. And so it's really hard to say what I am, especially I just re-arrived in Germany because of COVID, I haven't been in my house. This is my apartment that I've lived in for over half of my life in Germany. I haven't been here for a year and a half. And it's really funny to see my personality, my dress style, everything sort of change as soon as I moved to a different place. I once went with a boyfriend of mine to Algeria because I was a judge at a folklore festival. And he said, you changed, like you became an Algerian woman. I don't even know you once we're here. And I kind of feel like I'm a little bit of a chameleon, but obviously I don't belong to any particular place and I belong everywhere sort of at the same time. So I always felt like a stranger in the land that I grew up in, and I feel connected but distant to it. So yeah, world citizen is the best I think I can come up with.
Thank you. How about you, Roxxanne?
Very much the same. I feel like we're global sisters, Helene. I also born and raised and still live in the Los Angeles area. My father is Syrian Lebanese American and my mother is Brazilian. And I grew up very much immersed in both cultures. And so depending on who I'm with and where I am and, what's going on, I also, the way that I move, the way that I talk, the way that I dress, all of those things change. And people love to ask the question of like, well, which one are you more? Or which part of you is this? It all blends together and you never know how it's going to come out. So I feel very blessed to have been raised.
Sorry to interrupt you, but even if you identified it as Brazilian. Like, what Brazilian would that be, right?
You know, that's such a good point, because Brazil is as diverse, if not more, than the US. So you're absolutely right about that. Depending on where I am in Brazil and who I'm with, that also adds another layer of you know, complicatedness. So I'm just very blessed to have been raised and immersed in this, you know, what we call now Manat dances. And I think we're going to put that that explanation in the chat, and as well as Brazilian art and culture. And, you know, living in Los Angeles, which is a very diverse, multicultural city. I also very immersed in the Latin community here. I mostly speak Spanish most of the time at work and around town. So I'm just excited to be here. Thank you.
No, thank you. And this idea of hyphenated identity and plural identity is really at the center of these conversations and the Global South Project. Miami, you know, being in the United States, we're not in the Global South, but Miami is a very global South city. It's a Caribbean city. And Miami born Cuban American of mixed racial heritage, this idea of liminality, but also plurality and identity is at the core of the work that we do, and also something that I brought to the dance practice. And one of the things that Manat dance, baladi, raksharki, and, you know, belly dance is you know, the commercial term that people understand. One of the things that learning the dance did for me was just expand the borders, expand the world, musically, culturally, and so the Caribbean consciousness that I bring to the work. In the Caribbean, we speak so many languages, and we know that everything is this sense of migration and movement and water. So the dichotomy, you know, that we see in US culture, and this either or that happens a lot in US culture, is really not part of the consciousness that comes from area studies, right? So as an ethnologist, this, you know, looking at different cultures and coming from area studies and having hyphenated identities, I think it really helps us look at the world in terms of connection instead of disparate things. And so how do both of you bring this into your dance? So how do you learn a dance that may or may not be part of your culture? How do you teach the dance, Roxxanne?
I'm sorry, I'm so dying to jump in to answer that. And, you know, and it's important to say that those things, the borders and the definitions change. They're fluid over time. Like, I defined my father's family as Syrian Lebanese for a reason. The country my grandparents left around the turn of, you know, the 20th century was Syria. And they were Syrian. They ate Syrian food and spoke Syrian. And then that village that they're from is now Lebanon. And so then my father's generation redefined themselves as Lebanese. And so we're not Lebanese, we're not Syrian, but, you know, somewhere in the middle there. And that has an effect on everything that we do as, you know, in that community. So I just think it's really important that we keep that in mind, that it's fluid and it changes and it redefines itself over time. And we have to be fluid along with it. Because I feel like as Westerners, we'd love to put a definition on something like, this is what it is, right? And it's always this, and it always was, and it always will be. And we can't, as we approach the dance, we have to know that those things are fluid.
Thank you, Roxxanne. And Helene, as you have done so much ethnographic, you know, research and in the ethnology, you've had to really be a part of these communities to learn the dances. So what was that process like for you, spending so much time in these places, and what was some of the feedback that you got early on?
Oh, goodness. Well, the process is always completely different, right? A lot of times it's being in a village and just, or a city or wherever it is and participating. And sometimes it's, I studied North Indian classical dance for 12 years or something. Sometimes it's being with your guru and taking your lessons and taking your exams, and that's a completely different process. Sometimes it's like trying to explain what the process is impossible because there's a million of them. What was the second part of your question? Sorry, I'm so.
Well, part of the process, and what was the feedback that you got early on when you entered these communities?
Right. So the feedback, I could say 99.9% of the time has always been incredibly enthusiastic. Whether I'm in a village community and people are just like amazed that I can do their dance as well as them, or I remember, I don't remember what birthday it was, my 30th, my 20th birthday, something. I'm dancing at a folklore camp in Yugoslavia. It was Yugoslavia at the time, which dates me as well. And this was not a village setting. This was a camp where teachers of amateur ensembles from all over Yugoslavia came every summer to learn from the great masters of each of the different republics. And I'm dancing along, and we're trying to do this dance from Vojvodina, part of northern Serbia, and the great master Vladimir, Sputnik, who was there. And he's telling you to dance so small that you're dancing inside of your shoes, right? Which is like this really tiny little movement. And then he looks at me and goes, something like this. And it's just like, oh, what better birthday present could you have, right? So there's that enthusiasm. And then, of course, as a performing artist, all of these years, I've always been hired by the Iranian community, the Afghan community, the Turkish community, to perform for them. And that's already for me, a validation or a approval if people are willing to pay money to have you represent their culture at their cultural events. But then the audience reaction of people has always been amazing. Just very moving. I remember being at some wedding party and dancing, and a man coming up to me with a Persian carpet, because like he had to do something to give me that was, it was just very. So I felt included and honored and loved by all of these people, and that has made my life so rich and wonderful. And I'm so grateful for all of those different opportunities in my life.
Very affirming. And Roxxanne, growing up with the fez, as part of your cultural heritage and the legacy of your father and the work that you've done as a dancer, can you speak to what Helene just mentioned, like the feedback of the community and dancers of origin, dancers not from the culture? How is it approached? How is it viewed? What are some things that we can learn from that environment?
I'm so glad you bring this up, because I think at this point in time in the conversations we're having in our dance world, it's important to know that the people of the culture are happy and welcoming and love when dancers from outside of their culture learn their dances, but learn them appropriately and how they fit in the culture. That really is a very positive thing. Unfortunately, I think over time, what's happened is that we've gotten away from how the dance fits within the culture. And it's become its own global, as you mentioned, the commercial kind of belly dance idea has become a different thing. And so now we see people in the culture look at it like, what is this? Maybe 40 years ago, when we didn't have access to video, we didn't, it was not, hold on. We are not as global and have access to things as we do now. There was a little bit of more understanding, like, okay, these dancers, maybe they don't exactly know exactly how it's supposed to be, but they're trying. They're dancing within the culture. They're informed by the culture and by the live music, which is a huge part of it. And then that, informs the way that they dance. And so maybe it's not 100% correct, but they're trying. As I mentioned, I think the issue that we're dealing with now is we have the access. It's easier to travel. You can watch videos of everything from everywhere at any point in time. We have very knowledgeable teachers like Helene and others that you can learn what is real, but there is a disconnect there.
And so that disconnect brings up part of the topic of today, which is cultural violence and appropriation, which is, part of this globalization, right? The globalization and technology, and this kind of postmodern. In Cuban Spanish, we call it rice with mango, which just means like arroz con mango, arroz con mango. It's just like thrown together. And then how do we have an internal and community dialogue around the way that dance lives and breathes and grows through borders, right? Porous borders, but also speak to the origins and the respect. So, the baladi Raksharki that I learned in the early 90s was this very 70s, 80s, 90s Egyptian baladi modest style, this very Nagua Fawad style with some fifi. So that's the world view of Sharki that I grew up in. And then now we're seeing something very different. And we're seeing this very hyper speed, and people don't know how to talk about these changes, right? So the changes are part of globalization. It's part of the way culture moves and expands. But how do you think we can approach these difficult conversations about how things change?
Do you mind if I answer that?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So this has been something that is, occupying my mind 24/7. And so I think a way that I am approaching it is through education. And so during the pandemic, and, we were all depending on social media as like, a source of life. Certain events led me to starting a group on Facebook. And I know for some of you out there, Facebook is antiquated, but it was a platform that worked to bring together dancers of Manat origin, because it might be hard to believe, but in our dance form, 99% of the dancers are from outside of the cultures of origin. And those dancers are the ones who are, educating and making the moves and setting the tone for what our dance is. And so, instead of just being mad all the time at everything, I decided, we need to create a space where dancers of origin, and I know that's also a difficult title for some people, but for this conversation, dancers of origin of the Manat region to come together. And in coming together, we are having conversations, we're sharing the work that we do and sharing our perspective, which I feel is missing from a great part of our dance community. So, we've just kind of got together. We haven't done a whole lot yet, but that is in the process. And it was scary to some people. Like, what is this group? And are they going to police our dance? And are they going to tell us who can dance and who cannot dance? Absolutely not. We're not trying to police anybody. We're just trying to come together and say, like, here we are in this little corner of our dance world. And here we are, a group of dancers from all around the Manat region and its diaspora. And Sorry about that. And so how can we have a seat at the table? How can we have a seat at the table, and how can we be a part of the direction of our dance form?
Thank you. Manat, Middle Eastern, North African, Hellenic, Turkish, Hellenic from Greece area, Turkic from the Turkish. And
yeah.
Helene, can you speak to this idea of the globalization and cultural violence and appropriation? How can we add to the conversation? So I share with Roxxanne, for me, the scholarly approach, but also an artist in practice, is really important. Can you speak to the work that you do and how you address this?
Before I do that, can I back up just a little bit? Because I really want to address an issue that I think gets in this whole time of cultural appropriation, an issue that we kind of overlook. And that is the role of, and by the way, I have a little bit of problems also with Manat terminology because it leaves out a lot of the things that I do. And it also makes it sound like all of that region has this one dance and the same. And it this idea of, I'm saying too many things at once, but this whole idea that in the belly dance world, that there's belly dance and then everything else is sort of, so all the different folk and local things are sort of side issues. Whereas I see it, there's all of these incredible dances and Roxxarki is one of the little things in it. And so I have a completely different perspective of the world of dance. But let's go back to this other idea.
Helene, I do want to just say real quick, I don't love the term either. And at the moment it's the closest thing we can get, but I'm definitely open to other ideas.
Well, it's like
I agree with you.
To say the Islamic Orient, and that's not good because it's got too many other things that I want to say. And then if I want to say, well, the North Africa, the Middle East, the Balkans, Turkey, Central Asia, that's Caucasus, that's too long. And so it's, we need a word, but okay. So now I want to talk about this idea of the insider outsider, or the outsider insider, and how important that is in traditional dance. So let's say, for example, Iran, where traditional performers were almost never Persian women. They were insider outsiders. They were Armenians. They were Jews. They were maybe Roma. If you look at Uzbekistan, the mother of Uzbek dance is an Armenian, Tamara Khanum. If you look, there's a reason why in Egypt, so many dancers are foreigners, because it's not a thing that a nice Egyptian girl does. So there is a very old and traditional role for this insider-outsider person who knows a lot about the dance. And maybe with globalization, that's changing a lot. And sometimes that's like weird people with Danish ancestry from the United States. I don't know. I don't want to put myself in that position, but I am often put in that position, right? So I think we have to think about this idea of globalization and who these dances belong to with a lot more depth than we have. 25 years ago or something, I wrote an article for the Academy of Science in Hungary about global, who dances this global perspective. Here was another point that I brought up. So I talked already very briefly about this summer dance camp for teachers of amateur dance collectives in ex-Yugoslavia, right? So if I go to that camp and learn a dance, or if somebody from Serbia goes to that camp and we're learning a dance from Croatia, and even somebody from Croatia, but from a big city, is learning this particular dance from one little tiny particular village, who is more authentic when they do it? Does it have something to do with being born in that little village, being born in Croatia, being born in Yugoslavia, being born wherever, but being able to dance the dance, right? Have the knowledge. It's a very tricky situation. Who do these things belong to? And by saying, well, I have Danish blood, so that Danish dance belongs to me, somehow I don't think that works. Just like I don't speak the language Danish, I think of dance much more as a language practice, and who actually grows up in a language, speaks the language as your first language, or who's bilingual, or who can speak a little smattering of something with a bad accent, or who tries or who doesn't try, who lives a dance form. By the way, I also don't think that there is such thing as a dance. I think of there is dancing as a verb. If you don't do it, it doesn't exist. So there's a lot of terminology things that could have long discussions with you before we could actually get into some of these other issues.
And can I add one more thing in there? Because you're absolutely right. There's also the dancers from inside. I mean, the women from inside the culture. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily experts on the dance, you know.
Or sometimes they don't know anything. I mean, it really depends on how they've lived their own culture.
Absolutely.
And thank you for bringing up this idea of the failure of language and terminology, because our brains, you know, categorize the world around us through language, concepts, terminology. And so we've been having this struggle with the word belly dance for forever. You know, is it patriarchal? Is it colonial? You know, did a man, you know, it's an alliteration, it's a misnomer. And so we are, I'm happy that you modeled for us this idea that we don't have the perfect term, but we're going to keep going in the conversation, because I think it's the only way that we can move forward. And so in the traditional dances, I wanted to kind of come back to this idea of definition of what is traditional, what is contemporary, what is folklore. And when I studied with Helene 20 years ago, she flipped the script for me, and she blew my mind when she explained what she just said, that no, these are all the dances, and Sharki is one little piece of this whole world. And that opened up my consciousness and my sense of global citizenship, that, oh, I'm just learning this one piece that I love, that feels incredible to me, and it feels like home, but there's this entire other, you know, earth full of borders and dances and people, and the meaning of that. And we look at Egypt, right? So Egypt sometimes is just used as this, well, we don't have a perfect place of origin, but let's look at Egypt as this place where Raksharki and Baladi comes from, and let's start there. Can we look at how we define what the dance is? Is it folklore? Is it traditional? Who gets to dance it?
Well, part of the problem is you're saying the dance, and it has to be something, whereas it is dancing, and each enactment is going to be something completely different, depending on who's doing it and what kind of context, and etc.
So dancing, the verb and the noun, that the dancing itself has its own life, its own embodiment, its own meaning every time it's enacted.
Right. I mean, and then you could define, well, the kind of dancing I'm talking about involves more your hips or more your whatever. But there's also this world in the Middle Eastern dance scene, this idea that belly dance is sort of everything. So what Shekhat do is belly dance, and what Kabyle Berbers do is belly dance, and what some people in some village in Turkey do, even though they maybe don't even move their hips, is belly dance, because it's all sort of, and I think that really takes, that's like saying everything is Indo-European without looking, okay, we not only have Indo-European, and not only do we have all of these different languages, but we have a lot of dialects in those languages, and then we have slang that has to do with different age levels and everything. You know, the language that they spoke when I was a kid in the 60s is not the language that people speak now. And it's definitely different from one part of the country to the next, and one generation to the next, and one social economic level to the next, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The same thing you can say about dance, right?
And this makes me think of the idea, going back a few points, of many times the people from the community may hire us because they like how we are embodying their work. And when I look at Cuban traditional dances, when I look at salsa music, let's say, so I remember 20, 30 years ago, there was a band from Japan that was very a la mode, Orquesta de la Luz. They were Japanese, and they were, they just blew up with salsa. They had albums, and they were just like all the rage. And I remember, I was younger, I wasn't thinking so deeply about these ideas, but the feedback was like, wow, look at how great this salsa music is, and it's coming from Japan. And there wasn't any sense of annoyance around it. And so one of the things that I'm curious about, why do we see in our dances this sense of annoyance or discomfort around who gets to dance?
Are you talking about just discomfort within our dance group? Our dance
people have
community?
done such.
Oh, don't go ahead.
I think because people have done such horrible things. There's just a lot of horribleness in the world as well. So on the one hand, we want to be open to people trying and doing beautiful things. And on the other hand, there is just ugly appropriation. And that's not just the Arab community, that's the Roma community, that's the Black community, that's the Native American community, that's the Hawaiian community. It doesn't matter what. When commercialization and this feeling that you can just grab anything and put your mangoes with your rice, which might be fine if you're in Thailand, but is probably weird if you're in Cuba, right?
And because there's no excuse anymore. There's enough information out there that you can learn about the culture. There are teachers, there is resources. And, 40 years ago when we didn't have that access, people let things slide a little bit. But now there's no reason. The teachers are there.
The excuse that it's art. So here's the other problem. I can do whatever that I want. And so some people, there's one camp that says you can do whatever you want. And if it's art, it doesn't matter how, whatever it is. And there's another camp that says you can't do anything anymore because that's ours, even if they are like 1/8, whatever, right? I could go and invent a Iranian grandmother, but that doesn't make anything real, right?
No.
I have a great uncle who looks like he's Roma. Should I go and figure out if he really is, or if he's Sioux, or what is he? I don't know. So there's this, on the one hand, there's this overreaction on one, and there's this absolute coldness and uncaringness on the other side. And I don't know how to bring people together to just care about each other. But that seems to be a problem in politics and arts and the environment and anything.
Yeah. I personally think anybody from any part of the world is welcome to learn cultural dances, as long as you are approaching it with a sense of respect for the actual culture that dance comes from. So I know, and you're so right, Helene. There are some subgroups of our dance form that dancers have just said, I quit, I'm not going to do that anymore. They're not using their stage names anymore. They're going to an opposite extreme. And to me, that's a hugely missed opportunity, because what they could have done is said, well, instead of doing this, I'm going to start doing more traditional dances, or I'm going to learn more about the dances within the culture instead of just quitting.
I think people have taken on belly dance as an identity. They have a stage name, and they become the Oriental dancer. So then they don't have an identity anymore if their own person is being attacked.
Yeah.
Whereas what I've always done, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong, is just learn about other cultures and love other cultures. By the way, what you're seeing up there in the top left is a reconstruction that an Ardena is doing. It's Fresno, Armenian Fresno in the 1950s, church picnic. And they're not holding hands because it's COVID.
Oh.
Otherwise, this would be actually a hand holding dance.
Yeah, we were trying to figure out how to dance dubki, which is a hand holding circle dance as well. That's a good way to adapt that. I like that.
Not as fun. Works better with this dance than dubka, where you really need the feeling of everybody, I think.
And
Yeah.
Helene, with Anagdana, as you do these intensives around the world, who are the women that want to go so deeply into this study? And what do you see? What kind of connections do you see around the world?
Well, what's really wonderful is with, especially now where we have this Zoomlight, is how Anardana, although we have we have 4 places where we have it in Germany, San Francisco, Seattle, and Argentina. At the moment, the Argentina group is on hold because everything is on hold in Argentina. But this group has grown together so that people know each other across the other groups. We did a big trip to Morocco just before the pandemic hit in November, where we celebrated my 40th teaching anniversary, and people from all over Anardana came. It was really great. But who are the people? I must say, it's really frustrating that the people are less and less. I see less and less people who really want to commit to spending the time and delving in deep into learning something that's not just fast and simple. But the people who are there are really generally very, very, very interesting people. Many of them multicultural themselves. One woman who grew up she's from the United States, but grew up in Turkey and India and Switzerland and South America, and is now Muslim, married to a Pakistani, or somebody who is Korean, or somebody who's half Finnish, and then the people come out of the Middle Eastern dance scene to some extent, of the folk dance world to another extent, out of ethnic communities a little bit. So it's a big mixture. Usually they're somewhat older, but not always. The last Anardana performance, we had two women having their birthdays. One turned 27 and the other turned 72. That was pretty cool. So the idea of Anardana is that it brings women of all ages, abilities, and experience together, because that's what real life is about. We're trying to, we do highly technical stage dance forms as well, but we also do, community, social, folk dance forms. And there's room in Anardana for anybody, which is one of the wonderful things about it.
Which was so beautiful, especially as a documentary filmmaker, the film that you shared with the picnic reconstruction. And Roxxanne, I chose this video in addition to what you selected because I just love it. I mean, just as a filmmaker, I love green screen and I love this performance, and I just love the quirkiness of the technology with the classic movement and style that you're presenting. And so as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, you're telling a story through this video, you're an educator. What are some of the takeaways for the audience, for the dance community, in terms of how we can remix classic with the modern, with the technology, with the idea that borders move, and bringing kind of full circle to the story of how and why we dance?
Wow, that's a great question. I think that it's important to say, first of all, belly dance, what you're seeing as belly dance or Roxxarki is one part of what I do. I also do a lot of traditional dances. And my belief...
while she's on
So
mute,
sorry,
I
you
want
guys.
to say that reminds me of like an 80s video of Suhair Zaki or something with the background changing like that.
Yes.
It's really great.
That was the point. Thank you. I feel like it's really important for any dancer approaching a cultural dance that you have an understanding of, you know, the foundation of the dance. And while in what we call belly dance or rock sharky or manette dances, there are different styles in different places, there's different influences, you know, there's still sort of a common thread throughout. And so even though we're artists and we can grow and evolve, and things are very different today than they were at the time of this video that I'm representing, you have to know the foundation before you can evolve and create. And so my goal as an artist is always to be the anchor. Like, someone is going to evolve and do new and different and fabulous. I'm always going to find a way to bring you back to, like, where we can't say where we started, but bring you back to the foundation. And so that was, in addition to being a tribute to one of my favorite dancers, that was what I was going for in that video, and really in everything that I do. I mean, it is important to evolve. It is important to, you know, the fusion aspect and all that is valid. But if you don't know what you're fusing, if you don't know the foundation of the cultural dance that you're doing, then there's a problem.
Yes, thank you. I'm gonna take a couple questions from the Q&A. So hopefully we'll get more questions within the Q&A throughout the series. And so we have an anonymous question, which is, it is so important to recognize and appreciate the incredible diversity in our world and how that manifests in multiple cultural expressions. How is knowledge transmitted in a virtual world? And how does one without knowledge, an outsider, even begin to find the best sources to learn from without being inside the culture the dancing originates from?
So after having taught, like you guys, I'm sure, hours and hours and hours of virtual Zoom classes, I am so done with it, because although there are certain things that you have a really good eye for certain details, you know, like if you right your right foot like 4 inches to the left, you'd be more on balance, kind of thing, right? That you can see better than in real life. But it's not the same. That's not what dancing is about. Dancing is not really a virtual experience. It's an embodied, live, on the earth, sweating, breathing, olfactory, kinesthetic, audio experience. And so I think the answer to your question is go and dance with people. Either take, you know, classes with people who can really teach you something, or go and dance participatorily somewhere, go somewhere, be somewhere, feel this earth while you're here, and don't just sit in front of the screen. You'll be sorry when you're my age.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. And that's the approach that I take in my teaching and in the shows that I produce. You know, people go, are you going to produce your show online? No, it's about live music in person with people in like a live environment. So technology is great for a lot of things, but I think when it comes to, you know, especially these types of dances that we do, it's about dancing with the people.
Dancing with the people. And part of what I'm so excited about is tomorrow I'll be on the Miami-Dade College campus with dance majors and students. And then I'll also be offering a half-day ballet intensive in the Shimmy Shift Pivot methodology, which is multisensory and using the different intelligence and learning styles, having a deep cultural critical conversation like we're having now, and bringing it into the body, into the mind, somatically and emotionally as well in that half-day process. And that's really exciting. So I'm so thankful to Live Arts Miami, Miami-Dade College, and our funders for creating this opportunity, not just in these workshops, but we also have a series of community-based workshops in historical Miami neighborhoods. So these workshops will also be offered to teen girls throughout Miami-Dade County. So we're really proud of that. We have one last question, and circling back, and it's for the panelists, back to the acronyms. How do you feel about the acronym Swanna and Swanat? Do you feel that they encompass the larger cultures of the dance? I know Helene spoke about that earlier, better than Manat. And this person notices that it seems like non-dancers from the cultures of, quote, belly dance of origin have no idea what Manat means, and is the term more insular?
That's a great question. I know that in the academic world, Swanna and Swanat is used more frequently. I don't think either term is like the right term. I know from the perspective of Arabs and Middle Eastern people, I've had conversations with people. We feel like Swanna stands for Southwest Asian, North African. So that sort of Southwest Asian, was that what it did? Yeah, Southwest Asian erases who we are. So now we're just like this whole glob of people, where at least Middle East is a little bit more specific. North Africa, I think in the dance world, in our dance world, the H for Hellenic and the T for Turkish are important, Turkic. And I think we should add an A for Armenian, because I think the Armenian dance can be.
But then we need to add a G for Georgian and an L for Laz and an R for Roma and a P for Persian. And I just have a problem with the more you make it general, the less you see. So on the one hand, yes, we don't have a good way to talk about the place, which is why all my life I've been saying, well, I do dances from North Africa, the Middle East, the Balkans, Turkey, Anatolia, the Caucasus, Iran, and Central Asia, Afghanistan, Northern India, right? So I understand the need for that. But on the other hand, so we can have a tool, but we have to also look beyond it. We have to talk about what we're actually talking about. Because when you say Swanat dance, what is that? When you say Menat dance, what is that? That is a million things. Roxxarki is one tiny little thing. Mm-hmm. And so why not just say Roxxarki or something? I don't know.
Yeah, and there is no term. I mean, there just isn't. And I don't think I think we're taking shots at trying different things. And I still I keep telling the people that are in the group that I created, I don't like this name and I want to change it, but I don't know what to change it to. I don't want to call it belly dance. I don't want to call it, Roxxarki is one piece of exactly what you said. It's one piece of what we do. It's an important piece, but it's only one piece of that puzzle. And so the right name is elusive.
It's elusive. And I remember in grad school, as I was writing, my projects in grad school, we got stuck there and there was no answer. So it was this idea of just keep going, and keep thinking and keep creating. So before we say goodbye, I'd like to invite each of you for a parting commentary to our community about how do we add more transformation of cultural violence into empowerment through our dances and through how we live our life with dance. I'll start with you, Helene.
Look deeply and see. Look for the plurality of life and not just in dance, in whatever it is, and see if you can see what the good and the beautiful and the true is in that, and what is the commercial and perhaps the evil, or the whatever is the evil force that's ruining our world, and work always for that good. That's all I can say. And if I can add a little advertisement in the end of that, is that Anardana welcomes people. People fly in from all over the world to do these things. So, you know, if you're in Europe and you want to join the German group, or if you're somewhere in the United States and you want to join one of the US groups, please think about that. Anardina Germany will be having its performance after working virtually for a year and a half in December in Göttingen. And we're starting a new project in Seattle the first weekend of October. And anybody is welcome. Whoever comes to the first weekend gets to vote on the repertoire. We always choose that together. So
Wonderful.
thank
Thank
you so
you. Thank you, Helene, Roxxanne.
I'm hoping a bell is not going to ring now. I'm so sorry for the interruptions. I agree wholeheartedly, and I think that what I can add is if you approach it with respect, then you can't go wrong. There's plenty of resources out there. I wish we had, you know, a hub where all those resources were in one place that people could find. But look for scholarly resources, you know, interview the people that you're studying with and find, you know, look at their websites, check out their bios. You know, there's plenty of people like Helene, like myself, like Sahra, like, I mean, there's just so many dancers that have that background and that knowledge to share in a real and true to the source way. So be selective with who you study with and where you go for your information, and go beyond YouTube. YouTube is a great tool, but go beyond YouTube and approach with respect. I'm going to plug, can I plug real quick since she plugged? I also teach a course on connecting dancers to the, I say Arab culture, because that's what I know best. And so how dancers can connect to the culture and live it to understand the dance better. So you can always find that information on my website. I'm sure there's a link there somewhere. So all are welcome.
There is a link. Thank you both for your hermeneutics of generosity and your pedagogy and your excellence. So our mission at Hanan Arts is to empower, educate, connect through academic and intellectual and aesthetic rigor. And we accomplished that today. And I want to thank Live Arts Miami, our partner, and our funders and our community partners for this opportunity and bringing Shimmy Shift Pivot not just to the public, but also to the teen girls in Miami-Dade County. And I'm looking forward to staying in touch with all of you. And through our newsletter, through our communications, we keep everyone engaged. So again, from Miami, I'm in Miami Beach, Florida, actually. I thank you, I welcome you all to this conversation, to Hanan Arts, and to the work of these incredible panelists that we've been able to converse with today. So thank you, Live Arts Miami, and thank you to the team and the board of Hanan Arts. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks. Yay.
So are we
still live?
It's still recording.